Thanks everyone. Welcome. Very excited to share with you some findings from some qualitative research that we conducted about cyber. We know that it's a hot topic and ever changing. Every year we see the needle move a little bit more. We see issues come up that are a little bit different from the year before. So we wanted to do some of our own research and talk to some small business owners about cyber. So before we get started, just wanted to introduce myself again. I'm Kristina Witzling. I lead the P&C practice here at Zeldis. So this is my area of passion, my area of concentration. I've been with Zeldis since 2005, and I've been in the research industry since 1995. So you can do the math on that. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge this is a team effort, so I get to talk to everyone today, but this was really the hard work of my colleagues, Carolyn Sturm, Griffin Lynn, Sherry Hopkins, who really worked very hard to get this research prepared. So some of them are on, and they might be responding in the chat if some of you have questions, because they were involved in a lot of the day-to-day and did a lot of the interviewing. So, so as we go through, I wanted to acknowledge their work as well. So, and it's not advancing, which it was fine a second ago. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so we did some webcam in-depth interviews with small business owners. We did about 13 of them, hour-long conversations, very in-depth, wide-ranging, covering all sorts of issues related to their cyber risk, their attitudes, their awareness, their feelings, and cyber liability insurance. So very wide range of industries. We focused on under 100 employees, so we had sort of a range within that space. Pretty balanced on gender and age group, but a wide range of businesses. We had some hospitality, some services, personal services, professional services, restaurants, construction, some in the healthcare, counseling type of spaces. So a wide variety of folks here, and we actually had a fair number who do have some type of cyber liability, data breach, as they refer to it, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Exactly what they have, the education levels are limited with these small business owners, but some type of cyber coverage that they're aware of. So I think that's kind of an interesting little piece, but. So why should they care, right? I just run a small business. I'm just a mom and pop shop, or I only have 15 employees. Why should I care about my cyber risk? We know that it's critical for small businesses to pay attention. They are vulnerable. The fewer than 1,000 employees are really half of all breaches, and a fair proportion are even smaller than that. We know that they're vulnerable. We know we've seen before that hackers and bad actors are targeting small businesses, to get in, to steal data for phishing and all sorts of things. So we know that it's clearly an issue. They do have a breach. There's a recovery time, there's downtime, and there's a cost, not just a time cost, but an actual cost. And it can be several $100s. It can be, upwards toward $1 million. And we're just seeing that ever increasing. So we know this is an issue. So the question is, do business owners know that it's an issue? And the answer is, more and more, yes. So they touch a wide variety of data. We ask them, what do you do? And what are some of the different areas that you might have some exposures? And they have data on their customers, their employees. They have financial things. They might be processing payments if they're retail. They have their own data, things that they've collected and prepared, their own work. They might have medical information, or PHI on folks. So, and then they also work, especially small business owners that use things like Toast or PayPal or Square. They're using a lot of third-party folks where they're passing information back and forth. So that's a critical piece too. And they're certainly aware that they have these risks. They're hearing more and more about the kinds of things that are happening. So they're hearing about breaches and cyber losses. They're hearing about it in their personal lives as well. I think the one we hear most about and the one they talked a lot about is phishing. Those bad actors, the links to click on this, things that look normal, spoofing email addresses, just hacking, getting into systems, spoofing not just email, but also voices and images. breaches, as the bad actors become more advanced in their techniques. Things like wire transfer fraud, false invoices, in leaks of client information, data breaches of their vendors, and an employee making an error, or one or two mentioned potentially an ex-employee. A lot of these small business owners do have staff turnover, and so if they're in a retail situation or in a situation where they had to let somebody go and somebody maybe still has access, they didn't close all the doors, that they're vulnerable there as well. So. And some of them have had some things happen. And the more we talk to small business owners, the more we hear that they've had things happen. So sometimes it's in their business life and sometimes in their personal life. So one person, they didn't have multi-factor set up yet. They had an accountant who got a fake email, thought it was real, sent a significant amount of money to a hacker. So they were out a significant amount of money, and that led them to set up multi-factor, new policy around cyber. They've had closed calls, where you at the last minute you realize that this doesn't seem right, and that keeps happening over and over. One mentioned that their mom got an email that said, "We can fix your computer, we can help scrub your data, just give us your bank account." And the mom did that, and then there's a whole problem there. So sort of these types of things keep cyber in mind, and that led to some cybersecurity reminders. So it's a reminder that they need to be diligent. The flip side, though, is they know they need to think about these things. They don't really want to, right? They don't love it. And we hear this a lot when we talk to small business owners about topics related to risk and insurance. Small business owners largely want to run their business, and they started their business not because they wanted to be involved in all the businessy things. We're not talking about someone who went to college to become a CFO and went into accounting and then became a CFO. You're talking about someone who had a passion for helping people, for counseling, for food, for exercise, fitness, these types of things. And that's what led them to start their business. And so all these things come later, all these business things, these extra working, as we say, on the business instead of in the business. They want to do the things that they're passionate about. And so there is still a little bit of head in the sand when it comes to cyber risk. So they think, you know what? I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing better than I was before. I'm doing the best I can. And I really want to focus on running my business. So sometimes some folks say, you know what? There's only so much I can do, and I don't worry about it. I don't worry about it. I don't let it drive my day to day. A cyber incident might be unavoidable, and they just hope that that it won't impact them too much. So, and some of them think, I won't be a target. I'm not as vulnerable. I'm not a big fintech. Why would you come after me? I don't have something that somebody wants. I'm too small, and I'm not particularly vulnerable, or I don't have credit card data. So there is this, and I call it, you'll see later, I call this the push-pull, and we'll see the push-pull in a lot of small business issues, and especially with cyber. There's this, I should think about it, but I don't want to. So they know if something did happen, there could be some serious consequences. They could lose time, they could lose money, they could lose customers. This person says everything we do is online. We could be shut down, and we could also lose trust with our customers. But again, in that push-pull, they go, but people would understand, right? So our customers would understand. There's nothing we could have done. So again, there's sort of this dichotomy, this feeling of, they know that there's some serious consequences. And I think as we go through, we talk about some of the things that cyber liability carriers can do, making things easy for them to understand is particularly important, and making things sort of this, making things accessible, because they don't like to think about things that are too scary or complex. So they know what the risk is out there. So what are they doing to protect themselves? So they've come a long way. And if we talk to small business owners over the past several years, if we look at this 5, 7, even 3 years ago, I think we're seeing some of the needle moving where they're doing a little bit more. And as we saw before, as they have more things happen, they're starting to think about things like multi-factor, which wasn't really in the conversation 5 years ago. But now, a lot of our folks that we talked to mentioned it. So the first thing they do is rely on professionals. And, small business owners are big big outsourcers. So they like to outsource not just the tasks, but they like to outsource the stress, the thought process. So when they outsource their accounting to their accountant, they're outsourcing their tax burden and stress to that person. When they outsource to their insurance agent, they're outsourcing the stress of insurance. When they outsource their IT or hire an IT staff, they're trying to get rid of the stress of managing cyber and IT. So that's one reason that they use a lot of professionals. So some had IT staff, some work with outsourced service providers. So they have folks that they're working with. They also use what they feel are as secure as possible software providers. So I store my data in the cloud, or I use big names. I use QuickBooks, Microsoft, those types of things. And I use secure software. I use trustworthy providers, and they have some firewalls, antivirus software in place to try to prevent some attacks. And they've also started to institute some procedures. Still pretty informal, and a lot of them, this one person mentions compliance classes, but a lot of them was much more informal. Like I tell my employees to be vigilant, to be careful, but they've added MFA, or they have some password rules. I have long, complicated passwords. I limit access to on a need-to-know basis for my employees. They have some single sign-on, and they're reminding staff. So they're kind of, again, they feel they're doing the best that they can. So, and it's challenging. There's a number of challenges that come with keeping up with ever-changing cyber. And the first is knowing when to institute a procedure. Small business owners usually pride themselves on flexibility, and that's one reason they're small, they're nimble, they're able to change things. And so when they have to institute a lot of procedures and policies and passwords and typing things in, there's friction with employees, and that causes productivity, and it causes employees to be stressed out, not want to do these things. We're a small business, and we have a lot more procedures and policies than we ever had before, and there's always this friction point. So as one of our small business owners says, there's a dichotomy. It's convenience and security, and you can't have both, right? Think about when you go through TSA, all the things that we have to do now. So they watch all these passwords locking in. So there's this, again, that goes back to that push-pull. They don't really have a formal plan for what'll happen if something happens. They're a little bit still kind of winging it as they institute these new policies. The other thing is the flip side of using outsourcing and vendors, right? They get to outsource, and they get to send the stress to those folks, but that also means they have to trust them. And there is a vulnerability there. What if something happened with the cloud? What if something happened with QuickBooks? There's a little bit of stress there. And the other thing is cost. It's expensive to do all these things, to add software, to add insurance, to add policies, procedures, to outsource. We had one small business owner said, I try to not call IT unless I absolutely have to, because we're on an hourly contract basis and I don't want to pay for it. So there's a lot of barriers here that cause friction for them. And the biggest barrier is you don't know what you don't know. And with cyber risks and threats changing so much, there's always something new around the corner. And again, that's where they're relying on maybe their IT people, maybe their insurance agent or carrier to be ahead of the curve, because again, this isn't what they do for a living. So they're not peeking around the corner, and support with that is really important. So it's, what are the new bad actors? What are the new threats, the new scary things? And we did ask them about Gen AI. What do they think? What's coming? And there are two pieces of that. One of them is, the tools that they're using, Chat GPT, those kinds of things. They think it's safe. They hope it's safe, but they're not exactly sure. And the other piece is ways that hackers and those types of criminals are using AI to aid their evil ends. So one mentions, voice spoofing, image spoofing. So they can make a phone call and it sounds like you, and they can tell someone to transfer money. And so those are some scary things as well. So this idea of the unknown is certainly a critical thing. And this is an area where I think insurance carriers could be an eyes and ears for them. So insurance. So how do they approach cyber liability? And we're lumping cyber liability in with data breach for the purposes of this discussion, just because not everybody knows all the terms and every carrier has a different term. So we're talking about, all forms of type of breach coverage here. And many of them, as we said, 9 of our 13 said they have some form of cyber protection. They're not fully aware. Some of them know that they have a standalone or that they have an add-on, an endorsement to maybe their BOP or their another product, but they're not fully versed in it. If their agent told them to get something and they got something, then they kind of check the box. And they don't know their limits. Some of them know I have some limits and some deductibles, but they don't know exactly what's covered. So that sort of educational piece, they're not super well versed on. But what leads them to get cyber, and I think where we're seeing the needle move here as we look through the past several years of talking to small business owners is, certainly if their agent or broker tells them to get this. A lot of them they're outsourcing that thought process. They are taking their agent's recommendations. So sometimes they're, if they have standalone, their agent said you should get this, or you shouldn't get this endorsement. It's not enough. Don't add it on to your, E&O or your GL or your BOP, but add it on to, as a separate policy. They had something happen, so they got burned. And, how can I protect this from happening again? They're hearing more. So as they hear more, it's in their mental zeitgeist. They're thinking about it and they're wanting that protection. And they want that peace of mind, that just in case. Some folks, we hear this a lot. They might have had a business come up that requires it, right? They got a new client or a new account, or as their business grows. And some have always had it. They just, it was part of the package that they purchased, again, often as an add-on. So we have some comments here, one said, I'm storing credit card data. And so the agent says, get this. I'm like, you're right. I do have people's credit card information. You're probably right. I should be protected, or, and this is an opportunity for carriers as well, renewal. Here are some new and exciting products that we have that can augment your experience. And so the agent was able to make a recommendation at that time. And then this idea of peace of mind, right? I thought it's better to get it to protect us from what we don't know. So, eventually someone's going to get through, and at least we have this in place and we're ready for it. So the flip side, those who are resistant, goes back to that, a little bit of that head in the sand. And, the first thing is, I don't even know what it is. The agent's not mentioning it. I might have heard of it, don't really know what it is, don't know what it covers, or, heard the term, don't really know much about it. So this sense of, they're not seeking this information. And so if their agent or their carrier is not serving it up, they're not going to go looking for it. A lot of these small business owners. It's going to be too expensive. You hear all the time about how the cost of cyber are skyrocketing. We've never had anything happen, and my colleagues won't fall for anything. We're protected through our malware, antivirus software, or our IT team. Again, I'm too small. People in my industry aren't getting hit. Our vendors would take care of it if something happened. And there is an element which we hear very often when we talk to small business owners is, I don't trust insurance. Insurance is, it's a necessary evil. I don't believe in insurance. And so I only get things that I absolutely have to get, but not top of mind. We have someone here, I'm a restaurant, so I wouldn't want, no one's going to come after me. So those who do purchase, how are they selecting their carrier? It's largely on their agent recommendation, right? So we're not seeing massive shopping, efforts where they're going and comparing a million quotes. I don't think that's a big surprise, but they're taking their agent's recommendation. Whether or not the carrier has other products that they're working with already plays a role. So we have an example here where someone was working with Chubb, and added on, especially if it could be one bill, but even if it can't, it's sort of one source for billing, one company name to remember. It's just an easier process all the way around. So whether that's added on as an endorsement or added on as a separate, or bundled in as a separate policy, packaged in, that certainly makes it easier for them. And then we had some folks who said they prefer to work with a big name carrier because these are potentially expensive losses, and they want a carrier that they know can pay, or a carrier that can handle these claims. claims, and that just increases trust when they have that financial stability. And then of course cost, right? So the agent showed me this, the price is right, and so I just stay with this carrier and I don't really make a lot of changes. We didn't see a ton of remarketing types of things with the cyber. It's sort of, they put it in place, they check the box, and they haven't really touched it too much. They haven't had claims, things like that, where where they're touching it to be able to experience the service. A couple mentioned a few little extra services that the carrier might provide, but in general, they're not touching this too much. They're putting it in place to have that peace of mind. So they don't know much about it, and they don't prioritize learning about it too much. One says, I don't know, do I have $10,000? Feels like that might not be enough, but I don't know exactly what I have. One says, no, I have $1 million, and I know there's some different deductibles, but I don't know. But they don't have a lot of time to dedicate to insurance. So again, it goes back to the fact that I feel like I should know a little bit more than I do, but right now it's not a huge priority. So if they did learn more, some of the questions that they feel they should know, and these are things that their agent, broker, or carrier could potentially serve up to them. These are the kinds of questions that they have when they think about it, which is, what does it even cover? Does it cover, and we saw the mention before, like things go down, am I covered for that? What are my limits? Is that enough money? What would a loss really cost? And am I really covered? And who is covered? Is it me? Is it my vendors? Is it my clients? Where does the line start and end, right? Those are some of the questions that they have. What if they had a claim? How long is it going to take to settle? And will I have to shut down? Can I stay open? What will happen to me? What are the future implications? Am I going to lose my coverage? Is something going to happen to my business? Could the insurance company handle? What if a ton of people have a claim? Can they handle this? And then sort of looking at their needs. Could I be a better risk? Are there ways I could lower my costs? Should I be looking at my coverage on a regular basis? I'm setting it and forgetting it. Is that the best plan? And how can I reevaluate as my business changes and grows? How can I reevaluate my risk? So those are some of the questions that they have, again, when they're thinking about it. What if CrowdStrike, it took down half the internet? What if my carrier had all these claims? It's like a big hurricane, right? The hurricanes we've just had, the cyber version of that. Is my carrier going to be able to handle that? I could use some kind of session. Maybe someone could help me figure out how this could help me. I definitely have gaps. What if my website went down? I should probably be revisiting this. And when we talk to MSPs and IT providers, and I actually have a little inside baseball on this because my husband is a MSP. So when I talk to him, our dinner table conversations around these topics, the idea of revisiting the coverage comes up a lot with the service providers, managed service providers on the IT side, because cyber does change and coverages change, new coverages come. And because it is so set it and forget it, a lot of MSPs encourage their clients to revisit their cyber liability and make sure that they're covered. So that is something, or maybe it could be tailored. This business says, I have more risk from phishing and spam, responding to spam, than I do from hacking into my systems. Is there a coverage that could give me more for that? So those are the kinds of things that folks are thinking about. So what can insurance carriers do? How can they support small business owners? How can they position cyber? So to connect with them, again, because they don't want to think about it, sort of 4 key topics. So one is, could you make it cheaper? How could you make it more affordable? Obviously, lowering premiums. We know where premiums are, and they've been fluctuating quite a bit. But are there ways to offer packages, value, examples? Case studies and examples of ways that cyber was able to have a material demonstrative value for customers. And are there any discounts? Could it be bundled in? Clearly a starting point is endorsing onto another policy, but to encourage that standalone purchase, are there discounts that can be offered, or ways to make it more affordable? Can you make it easy? Because everything needs to be easy. They don't want to think about it. So could you do it as a one-stop shop? Are there online options? Is there a point of contact for questions? Is there any support that you offer? So are there any training opportunities or webinars? Maybe there's a risk assessment, maybe there's an app or ways to assess risk, especially those who don't have in-house IT or don't want to pay to tap that IT on that hourly rate, right? That's a little bit of a hole there. And is there a way to reevaluate, a check-in? Are you up to date? You know what? Your types of business has had these 3 types of cyber losses this year most commonly, and let's make sure you're covered. And that feeds into the education piece, right? A coverage summary, make it easy for them. Here's what you're covered for. Here's what this means in layperson's terms, and reassurance that this is designed for small business. You know, we very often hear small businesses feel forgotten in the insurance world because they think that everything is designed for bigger companies. That leads to a little bit of skepticism on their part about insurance because they assume that they're being shoved into a box that they don't fit in. But knowing that there's products designed for them or for their industry. So our restaurant example that we looked at earlier where the person said, I'm not a fintech, right? Well, here's ways that a restaurant's vulnerable. Those types of things can help make it more accessible for small business owners. So maybe some training. This person happens to use the Hartford, or the Business Association, Free to My Employees, if there was some kind of information session, and make it easy to understand the importance. Why is this critical? So these are some of the things to do to sort of shift the narrative. So this is content and the kinds of content that might motivate small business owners. The last thing I want to touch on is tone, speaking to tone. So there are things that you can offer. You can offer training, you can offer webinars, you can offer coverage summaries, you can offer examples. And I think, but one thing, and we see this again when we talk to managed service providers, is this idea of an empowerment tone versus as they call it FUD, right? The fear, uncertainty, doubt tone. And when cyber is in the conversation, a lot of times it does lean more toward that fear, uncertainty, doubt. And because they're caught in that push-pull where they don't really want to think about it and they want to believe that what they're doing is the best that they can do, that fear, uncertainty, doubt type of communication freaks folks out. So they really would rather hand this off to an expert. So what they need is this idea of ease and empowerment without being overwhelmed and shamed. So they're looking, ultimately, the emotional benefit they're looking for is peace of mind, right? I've got the right product. It fits me. It fits my business. I can stay on top of this in an easy, accessible way, and I can find ways to reduce my cost. So I think that's really important to think about when, if you're an insurance carrier or a cyber provider or an MSP or an agent or broker, and you're crafting communications to your customers. I think how you talk about the offer is as important as what you're offering, because you can have a fantastic suite of services, and if you scare folks away, they'll never take advantage of it. And so I think there's sort of that duality there, where they're looking for an expert. They're open to that expert opinion. They just need they need that time and that space to listen. So that's our overview here, half an hour here. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat, but if there are any questions, be happy to answer them. And if anyone would like any follow-up, there was lots of information here, and we're happy to share, everything that we have, that we did, again, and a shout out to my colleagues who did a lot of this work, but we're happy to jump on a call with any of you and go over any of this in more detail if that'd be helpful.